Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into our second installment of the MARCA Spring Panel Series. My name is Ali Warwick. I am the MARCA Eastern PA and New Jersey Director for counselors. So, you may have seen us in our first installment that was on our YouTube page a couple weeks ago. But we are here to serve you all counselors throughout this pandemic, throughout really anything that you all need in your territories, working with your students. We're all here for you. And today, our topic for our panel is higher education and enrollment trends amidst COVID-19. So we heard from y'all, we heard that, you want to hear more from the college side about, what we're seeing institutionally and then also nationally in different kinds of colleges and universities throughout the country. So we have a wonderfully curated panel today of 3 admissions counselors who recruit regionally in the Mid-Atlantic area, 3 members of MARCA. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with some questions. So we can get started with Amanda from DePaul.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Wulle, and I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions for DePaul University. I've been with DePaul for about 2 years now, just over that. But the last time I was on campus was over a year ago, almost a year and a half ago now. And I am regionally based out of the New York City metro area. So I cover a little bit of all of the area. But just to give you a little oversight of DePaul, we are based in Chicago. We have a dual campus model. So we have 2 campuses within the city, one in the Lincoln Park neighborhood and one in the Loop neighborhood. And we divide those off by academic programs. So the business school, our College of Communication, and our College of Computing and Digital Media are in the heart of the business sector of Chicago. And then our College of Liberal Arts, College of Health and Sciences, Education, and then our conservatory-like programs of music and theater are located at our more campus, traditional campus environment of Lincoln Park, which is a more residential neighborhood in Chicago. With this, all of our students get a LPASS, which is the Chicago transit system, so they don't have to worry about getting around the city with their student fees. That is already covered. And another kind of cool and unique thing about DePaul is our first quarter. We're on the quarter system, but our first quarter, all first-year students will take a course called Discover or Explore Chicago, where they spend the first 10 weeks of their academic year learning about the city, as well as it integrates with DePaul. I'm happy to talk more about DePaul, and if you want, at the end, I will put my contact information in the chat, so you might be able to see that, or put a PowerPoint up with my contact information, so you can email me with any questions specifically about DePaul.
All right, let's pass it on over to Matt from the University of Georgia.
Hi all, I'm Matt Willcox. I'm the Regional Admissions Officer for the University of Georgia. I cover Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and West Virginia. I'm located in Delta Hall, which is our building on Capitol Hill. It's where my office is, and I live in Alexandria. It's lovely. I've been with the University of Georgia for more than 20 years in a number of roles, and have really enjoyed my time now in admissions. Some things about University of Georgia. So when I moved up here from Virginia to Virginia from Georgia, football is a big deal back home, and I thought I would spend a lot of time talking about our research projects, our academic profile, this kind of thing. And then I would get to college fairs and students come up and say, do you all have sports at your school? And I would die inside just a little bit. So if some of the things, if you don't know as much about Georgia as I thought people do, that's fine, you're not alone. We're in Athens, Georgia. We're a college town, a wonderful place, cool music and art scene, neat coffee shops. If I say it's hip, I feel like I sound even older than I am, but it's not a bad description of Athens. About an hour and a half outside of Atlanta. We're a big school, big public state Southern school, about 29, almost 30,000 undergraduate students, almost 10,000 graduate students, and a big school. So we've got 17 schools and colleges and more than 200 majors and academic programs for our students. So if you've got students that are looking for that traditional big state football Southern school, I think Georgia's a great place to look. We've been fortunate in the last few years that we've been attracting some really stellar students. And so our numbers are a little more selective than they had been in the past, and that sometimes surprises my counselor friends. If there's anything that I can help you with or questions that you have about the University of Georgia or our admissions process, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to work with you. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we have Tamara from Miami.
Thank you. So I'm Tamara Lapman. I'm Associate Director of Admission at the University of Miami. Of course, we are located in Coral Gables, Florida. I am located in central Pennsylvania, and I work specifically with students from Pennsylvania, from central and southern New Jersey, and I also oversee international admission. So a little bit of a lot. I've been with Miami now for about 2 years, but I've been in admissions for going on 16. So of course, this past year has shaken things up, has been a little bit different. But I'm really excited to be able to share with you how so much has remained really constant. The University of Miami has about 11,000 undergraduates studying 180 majors across our 11 schools and colleges. How I really like to describe us is having the opportunities and resources of a big school, but the attention of a much smaller one. So it's a close-knit community. Students get to know their faculty, their advisors really well. All of those resources are super accessible. Still a place with a ton of school spirit though, really engaged student body. And of course, it doesn't hurt that we have palm trees all around us.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for that brief insight to your institutions and to yourselves. So to get us started, our first question that came from our high school counselor population is, can you discuss some of the ways that your institution pivoted to both virtual learning and visiting opportunities for recruitment for this fall 2021 cycle?
I'll go first. So I actually am very impressed with how DePaul has pivoted virtually in this kind of COVID-19 era. We first had our first big freshman, because we were in the midst of, admissions season and yielding season. So we switched our big yield day online in a lot of different ways. But things that we have done this year that I'm very proud of is our deep dives with professors, as well as kind of informational sections on majors. So we've really taken to students learning all about the different programs that DePaul has to offer and doing what we call deep dives. These have been for both major exploration sessions with different majors, as well as, career center, housing, and then also faculty Q&A and all of that kind of stuff. So things that we weren't even able to offer when we were in person, that faculty have now been very open to in this kind of virtual environment. I also be recruiting students that are pretty far away from Chicago. Being in this virtual environment gets them to really know this school from a bit further away. We haven't really offered in-person visits to campus, and we're currently only offering in-person visits to a select group of states based on the Chicago restrictive travel order. So not all of my students are even able to get to campus to choose if DePaul is right for them. So we've had to really pivot and put a lot of things online. And I'm very proud of the way we've really offered all of our offerings that we've had for students.
I'm happy to jump in next. So from the start last March, we've really been committed at Miami, of course, to the health and well-being of the community, but also to academic continuity, and that continuity expanding into our admissions efforts as well. So really trying to make, well thought out decisions, not reacting rashly. And I think that's something that our students have certainly benefited from and appreciated over the course of the past year. So in terms of offering courses in remote and hybrid formats, we did see 75% of our student body return to campus, both for the fall and spring semesters. So, there still has been a robust campus life, though it's also been well supported virtually for those who, for any number of reasons, did not return to campus in Florida. From the admission side of things, of course, we pivoted We've begun offering so much online, from our large programs to 3 times a week virtual info sessions. It has definitely allowed us to see a lot more students than we ordinarily would have. They've been very well attended, and I can't imagine those are going to be going anywhere. So we have very recently reopened for admitted student visits, offering smaller sessions, of course, than we have in the past. But the idea of offering all of these virtual opportunities, both broad general admissions information, as well as smaller receptions and opportunities to really go in depth with our different schools and colleges. I think those are here to stay. And I think that's, I'd like to see that as a silver lining of COVID, that we've learned to be really nimble.
I'll say when we talk about pivoting to virtual, I think regional admissions officers were probably as well set up for this as anybody in the world. We were used to being zoomed into meetings where everybody else was physically there and we were on a screen somewhere. So pretty good on that front. UGA, we moved virtual and into hybrid courses, and the transition went more smoothly than anybody, I think, hoped for. And in the fall, we're planning to transition then back into in-person instruction like it was in the before times. For our side in admissions, virtual high school visits have been wonderful for what we can do with them, and the ability to jump from Richmond to Baltimore back to Virginia Beach in 1, 2, 3 high school visits has been lovely. I do look forward to the opportunity to do in-person high school visits when they're safe to do again. I think that there's a lot that we get out of that in-person connection that I look forward to. But we've had a lot of virtual programming. I think my colleagues also can probably speak to being a regional. I've gotten to lead virtual campus tours in a way that I certainly never did from Washington, D.C. in the past, and that's been wonderful.
Thanks, y'all, so much. Our next question coming from counselors, and this is going to be a pretty open-ended one, but what are some of the most glaring admission and enrollment trends that you have noticed throughout the past year? And I mean, it's hard to take ourselves back 12 months, but what are some of the first things that come to your mind?
I can lead off here that certainly some of us have seen an increase in the number of applicants this year. And we at Georgia moved to the common application, which compounded that. And a lot of us went test optional for the first time, which compounded that further. But generally, we're seeing a trend of some schools, a larger number of applicants. And I think that has surprised a fair number of us. And we're going to see different things in what we do with admitting students. We may admit a few more students. And certainly, I think we're going to talk about wait lists probably some more, but a number of us are going to see slightly larger wait lists, maybe going later than we did in the past, as there's a lot of uncertainty around what those big numbers mean for all of us.
I think when you also think back that this was also kind of the first year without the standards of good practice being at the forefront, we sometimes forget that that was a thing that we were like worried about. And then all of a sudden COVID happens and we're worried about moving our enrollment deadline to June 1st from May 1st. And like, how do we keep the students to come? And I know we're going to talk a little bit about deferral in a bit, but like what that kind of boggles my mind that was such a intense topic pre-COVID that has kind of just completely washed away. And of course, the way we talk about testing, the way we talk about test optional and even test blind now, I think is a great conversation to be having because of what it stands for and what it means. And like even in the AP exams in spring of 2020, like what did those AP scores really truly mean when they were being tested in 45 minutes online in a computer? Like, so I think that brought up a lot of questions about how to test and what testing should mean and all of those things that we're going to have those conversations throughout this. I think it was just a catalyst for those conversations to happen in the future.
Well, I'm building off of what Matt mentioned earlier with the growth in applicant pools. we saw a jump in our early decision applications. And as I've had lots of conversations with folks on your side of the desk, I've certainly understood that in a time of so much uncertainty for students, maybe they're trying to grasp onto that, to know what the future holds. And so as enrollment managers, that has, meant some different challenges for us in terms of responding to that interest, which of course we love to see, but ensuring also that we're not over enrolling through those early decision plans. Of course, now we're in the throes of regular decision, wanting to make sure that that doesn't become even more incredibly competitive than in years past. So certainly, responding to those trends as we've been seeing them emerge, certainly, talking more about test optional and what that means within our holistic review process. So yeah, those are the things that I would definitely point out.
What a great segue, Tamara. That's a really great insight, you three. But my next question coming from counselors would be, how has the review process changed this year with so many students going test optional? And obviously knowing that there's a really strong population of students who did not submit test scores for one reason or another, mostly because of access to testing. But how did your review processes change?
Well, I'll go first since we were already test optional. So DePaul has been test optional for almost a decade. So in process, it didn't really change that much. We did see, a significant rise in our test optional applicants, but the overall review process didn't change too terribly much. I would say we went even a little bit more test blind this year than we have in the past, and not calculating testing for any of our students, even when they do submit, just to kind of give an even playing field to all of our students. So if anything, we went a little bit more test blind than we normally do, but for us, it wasn't too terribly different than what it had been in the past.
So it was a big shift for us at the University of Miami, being test optional, and in the same year also implementing a supplemental essay. And I love that these things happened in tandem because it did give us more qualitative pieces in our review. And even with 40,000 or 43,000 applications this year, we are still really committed to that holistic, thorough review. So really very deliberately asking that supplemental essay question and reviewing that as we're getting to know applicants. And so about 50% of our applicant pool has chosen, to apply test optional this year, was, just not part of those conversations then. So I think it happened in a really very smooth way for us. And, hopefully that'll continue into the future.
Yeah, fairly similar at the University of Georgia. Thankfully, we were already in the process of a process that used a holistic review of students. We were using a whole student review to think about our applicants and generally weighting things in the academic part. We're looking at curriculum, we're looking at grades much more heavily than we were looking at test scores ever. So when the Board of Regents, and in our state, we do have to get permission from the Board of Regents to be able to do things like go test optional. And when we're talking about the future of that, that'll come up again. But when we were able to move to a test optional situation, we weren't changing a ton of things about what we were doing. We just had one less piece of information there. And so our process, while we were able to consider students who did want to submit test scores for us, thankfully we had a process in place already which valued all the other things about our students. And so it was pretty easy for us to switch gears into that test optional world.
Awesome, thanks y'all. Very cool. So this had been alluded to earlier, the population of students that may have deferred from fall 2020 to fall 2021, and if that population affected this incoming class. And I would love to know y'all's thoughts on, what was that population for your institution, if there was one, and was the impact on fall 2021 as drastic as counselors and students may have thought?
So I'll get started with this one. Certainly, we saw a greater number of those deferral requests from fall 2020 admits, but not to the extent that it impacted numbers for this year. And I know that was a real concern on the front of so many students, families, counselors' minds. So at least for that was not something that really weighed on our decisions or numbers for fall 2021.
Similar, Georgia. We did have a few students who wanted to defer or look at other options given the pandemic and the uncertainty around that, but nothing that's moved the numbers in anything like. We've heard also a lot of anxiety from students and counselors and parents about, some great number of deferred students that are going to throw off next year's class, and we haven't seen that, and I haven't spoken to any colleagues that have seen anything like that.
And I will just agree that it really didn't come into play at all with the way we read applications or anything for this cycle.
I know I'm not a panelist, but I would also agree from my experience. The population was not as large as I think some families may have assumed it would be. So to alleviate any concern there from the counselor or family side. But thanks y'all for your input. Kind of switching gears to more of a financial aid and scholarship mindset here. Has COVID impacted your ability to offer any financial assistance to students, whether it be merit-based, need-based, anything like that? What has changed there, if anything?
I'll start off there. The short answer for us has been no. The number of scholarships, merit and academic scholarships that we're offering through our office hasn't changed. Although, again, because we have a larger applicant pool, they are going to look even more selective than they did in the past, but we are able to offer about the same number of scholarships that we were in the past.
And I would say our merit scholarships really haven't changed. We have seen an influx in appeals for financial aid packages, especially with the financial aid being that prior year kind of situation. So we have seen a increase in appeals due to parental job loss or income decrease that needs to be really factored in to the current year FAFSA that isn't necessarily reflective because it is from 2 years ago. So we have been very flexible on our appeal processes and trying to offer money. I think it comes from that Vincentian heart of DePaul. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but we are a Catholic institution. We fall under the Vincentian mission of helping the poor and underprivileged communities that St. Vincent de Paul went out and helped. So I think that kind of falls back. So our financial aid has changed a bit, but it's more of reflective in the appeals. I think we're being more forgiving and flexible on appeals to financial aid than maybe the original package that we give them. But that would be probably the biggest change with any scholarship or financial aid.
So I'm excited to mention here a pretty big shift for the University of Miami starting for fall 2021 that really is independent of COVID. And that is that we've implemented a commitment to meeting full demonstrated need for all students we admit. So we have been making this climb towards that with different subsets of the population prior to this year, but being able to go out the door with that promise, I think in these times more than ever has been very reassuring to students and families. So in that, as counselors, you might have seen or sort of be anecdotally hearing maybe a little less about our merit awards as more of those dollars have been allocated to our need-based awarding.
Awesome. That's great to hear, Tamara, about Miami matching need. Very cool. So a quick follow-up question about the financial aid, any financial aid changes or scholarships with the move to test optional. Maybe Amanda, you may not be able to speak to this since it wasn't a change here, but DePaul, but for either Miami or Georgia, did you notice any changes or trends that had to do with students who may have applied test optional that also may or may not have been eligible for a merit scholarship? How has that process changed?
That's a wonderful question, and it's a great place to reiterate that students who applied test optional were at no disadvantage at the University of Georgia, either in the admissions process or in scholarship review. And we spent more time this year reading more applications, and lots of your essays and extracurricular, and I got to read a lot of applications this year. It's great. We were able to use some of those reads in our scholarship review process in a way that without having test scores, we used that additional information in the read scores to be able to do that.
I'll be brief here and say ditto to most of what Matt said there. So for us, students were not at an advantage nor a disadvantage in admission or scholarships based on whether or not they submitted those test scores.
Awesome. That's great to hear, y'all. Okay, so looking ahead, post 2020, 2021 cycle, 2021, 2022 cycle as well. But do you have any forecasts for next year in terms of maybe class sizes or re-implementing testing agencies or anything like that?
Oh, if only we had that crystal ball. I can't honestly say, certainly I think the way we read has shifted. I think that we are maybe sort of doubling down on that, not just the holistic review, but that really human element to it. And that's certainly here to stay. But I don't know that, quantitatively, I can really predict anything.
If only we had that crystal ball, right? I hear you. And it's so much of that like TBD sort of thing. And we can't tell the future. We couldn't tell that COVID-19 was going to happen and we couldn't predict the fall 2020 cycle. But yeah, Matt, did you have something to add?
Just to say on forecasting, we don't know what the future of test optional sort of thing, we don't know what that will be for us. We don't get to decide that for ourselves. But for things like class size, we do know that that's not likely to change at the University of Georgia. We're happy with the size we are. And so probably will continue to enroll the same number of students.
And at DePaul, we're happy to grow, but we're also happy with our size, though we have room to grow. So, which is really odd to say in the middle of a city, but we do have space and we've, are adding new programs. So I'm very happy of what our president's plan, the president of the university's plan is for the university. So I am happy to have more students, especially for my territory. So your students on my campus in the future, for sure.
Very good, very good. So on another kind of separate note, are you noticing any trends with transfer student enrollment, perhaps from community colleges?
I'll lead off. We have seen a slight increase in number of transfer students applying to the University of Georgia. Whether that's from community college or where that's from, I couldn't say, but we have seen a slight increase in number of transfer students. I certainly would encourage any student who's unsure about maybe studying out of state or paying that out-of-state tuition, if they're thinking about doing a year or two at a smaller school or at a community college. I always encourage that. I think that's a wonderful idea, and I hope students do take advantage of that.
DePaul's always been a very transfer-friendly institution. In fact, I am a first-year counselor, so I don't even really deal with transfer students because we have a full staff of transfer counselors. So our transfer counselor staff is almost just as big as our first-year staff. And I think that has to do with a lot of the schools in Chicago and the partnerships we have with them. But DePaul overall, we've seen our transfer numbers dip a little bit, but I think that's as more and more schools across the country are becoming transfer friendly and transferring more credit in, the transfer population has a lot more avenues to go different places. So we kind of see our numbers dip a little bit, but I think that's just because other schools are starting to actively recruit transfer students like we've been doing for years.
And I'll just quickly add, at Miami, we've seen an uptick in our transfer application numbers. I don't know that I'm really in a good position to explain why that is or to dig into those trends. But I think certainly knowing that students are exploring all the options that are available to them is a really positive thing and one that we encourage.
Yeah, definitely. Alluding back to that, Tamara, you mentioned earlier that Miami was seeing an uptick in ED applications. They're kind of latching on to maybe that certainty, could be that. So very cool. Let's talk a little bit about, for any of your institutions that may take demonstrated interest into consideration, how do you suggest students demonstrate interest in a world where there's a pandemic and they may not be able to come and visit you all?
Well, for UM, the clearest way to demonstrate interest is by applying ED. Up to and including this year, we've only really used demonstrated interest in deferred students and in waitlist kind of situations. So it hasn't, played a major part in our review process otherwise. Certainly we have so many virtual opportunities. We want students to take advantage of those, just as they might have or will in the future go back to those in-person visits. So yes, we do keep track of that information, but we really want it to be very authentic. But hopefully that kind of alleviates the thought of it being a major thing for UM admission.
And I will say we look at demonstrated interest for kind of along the same lines of our deferral and waitlisted students, but also kind of that lower quartile of students. So those, we also become a little bit more need aware with those students as well. So demonstrating interest and that need aware factor do come into play for about the bottom 25% of our applicant pool. And so this could be going to a virtual visit, emailing with me or with the admissions office, giving us a phone call. Really, we are using Slate, which I'm sure you as counselors know very much about. And so Slate has a way of tracking every little thing. So we can see that engagement, even if a student logs into the student portal and starts clicking around the website, or we send them an email and they click on the link within the email. We can see those clicks and those interactions, and that boosts their engagement score with us. So for those students that are maybe at that lower 25% pool, we will see if they've attended events, met with our counselors, searched around the website, clicked on emails, because that shows that they are truly interested in us and we want to give them a chance, even if they might not be the most academically ready student, or at least the academically within our numbers student. So we want to give them a chance. And so that's why we kind of look a little bit more heavily with that lower quarter student.
Now, I mentioned in my intro that if counselors, if you have questions that I can help with, please reach out. If your students have questions they can help with, I'd love for them to email me. We don't use demonstrated interest at the University of Georgia in our admissions process. And I think every student that I've ever spoken to in my life has emailed me this year to let me know that they're still interested in Georgia. And I don't know if that's we're all home and on our computers and they have time to do it. That's great. But it's not. You can tell your students, they don't have to email me every week. It's not moving the needle for them.
As another Southeastern state institution, I understand that very well. But yes, thank you all so much. It's also great to reiterate that that demonstrated interest, like Amanda said, is not just visiting. It's a lot of different things that can boost that engagement score to let them know that, let the institutions know that they're interested. Awesome. So we only have a couple more questions left for today, but what negatives do you feel that the pandemic highlighted about the college application and admission process?
I'm happy to start on this. And I think it's just something we know in the college admissions process that none of us are comfortable with. And that's that some students have more means to do things than others, and it tilts the playing field in their favor, despite our best efforts to make things as equitable as possible. And that has really been brought to the forefront in COVID, when students who have the means are able to do things, to visit campus if it's available, or to take an SAT or ACT test that other students weren't able to, or continue their studies without any kind of interruption because they are not negatively impacted financially, or they have the ability to do so, or they have the internet access. And while we as institutions do try to have an equitable and fair and thoughtful process, that's a reality that I think was really highlighted this year.
I would add to that the anxiety that's been sort of intrinsic to the process has been heightened, and that's unfortunate. And I think we try to do what we can to mitigate that, but certainly there's just so much more that students and families are grappling with that unfortunately really comes to light as they go through this process.
And I will just agree with both of them. Like they said that more eloquently than I probably could have.
Definitely. All right, thanks, y'all. On the flip side of that, you could probably anticipate what this question will be, but what benefits or positives do you think came out of the pandemic as it relates to the college admission and application process?
I honestly think it helped us show that you can work from anywhere. I mean, as regionals, we already knew that. But I think it shows that you can really be productive, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in that traditional workspace environment. But also, we still can connect with one another, even when we are apart from one another. Now, yes, I do miss my hugs, but I still can see my friends and see my students and get to know them in a virtual environment. And I feel just as connected to them in this year that I've had than I have when I've even just been able to just go to a Starbucks and sit down with them. So I'm really pleased with all the virtual life that we've kind of created. And I think that's going to perpetuate. I think being able to kind of go with what Matt said about the negatives of showing what people with means can do, allowing these virtual visits to continue to give students without that means a chance to see your institution. So I really think that that kind of brings out a positive of that negative, is that this could be a continuation where students can take this forward and have virtual opportunities in the future.
Something that I think always preached throughout my career in admissions is that it is a really human process. And so I think that there's been an opportunity to stress that now, that we're all in this together, that we understand how so many different things have changed, but that we understand that, and that we're hearing that. And I hope that has been reassuring to students, as they're going through that. I know that I've tried to stress that when they are reaching out by email or we're Zooming, and I think that's, so again, I've been saying that for a long time, so I don't think it's anything new, and I also don't think it's going anywhere.
I think we've had a number of positive, silver linings to such a tremendously terrible thing. High school visits that are virtual, the ability for me to, switch gears, like I said, all over the map, and to work with schools that maybe aren't big feeder schools for us, but we have a few students who are interested. Zoom has made that possible for us, or Teams or whatever we're using. That's been really good for being able to connect with some of those schools that are far flung places with maybe only a few students interested in Georgia. We read more applications in greater depth than we've ever done before. And I think we're all happy that that's a part of our process that we hope continues. And nobody's asked me about Aunt Becky in a year. And I think that's got to be a highlight. Yeah.
Well, just you wait. I'm pretty sure there's a Netflix documentary coming out about it in a couple of months.
No, it dropped,
that made me laugh.
It dropped today. It's on Netflix now.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So everyone that's watching now on YouTube, go to Netflix if you want to be caught up with that Varsity Blues scandal.
Promptly pop on over to your Netflix home screen. Awesome. Well, that leads us into our very last question for our panelists today. What suggestions do you have for counselors, or what advice do you have for counselors in supporting their current juniors and rising seniors as they're starting their college process in a whole new world of admissions?
Tell them about us. Let them really reach out to us and know that we aren't these scary people. I like to say I'm super bubbly, so why would you ever be scared of me? So just encourage them to talk to us and see what kind of opportunities we can give them, whether that's in person in the future or still having that virtual tie-in. Because I like I said, I think that's still going to be a part of things. So just have them reach out to those colleges that they're interested in, because that's why we're here. And I think we'll be more connected now than in the past.
I'll just quickly say that to our colleagues on the other side of the desk, we love you all. We look forward to working with you. Thank you for being such great partners to us. I don't know if I have advice for you to give your students, because you do a tremendous job in helping us and letting us sometimes work with and talk to your students. So thank you for that. We really appreciate you.
The only thing that I would chime in with is try to see the silver linings. And so encouraging students that with these changes have come all of these new virtual opportunities for them to explore that and really, hopefully flip that that negative, approach because, we're working really hard, as we know you are on your side of the desk, to ensure that we're finding that great two-way street of fit, that students are finding the right institutions, that we're finding the right students, and keeping these lines of communication open is more important than ever.
Absolutely. We are all on the same team, just in different capacities. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your time, panelists. This has been super valuable, not only for our counselors, I'm sure, but also for me hearing from you guys. So thank you again. Our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We will be doing more of these every other week throughout the spring leading up to our counselor conference in May. It's going to be a case study separated by territory along with some other pieces there. So please check back on our page every other week for some more really insightful nuggets of information from our MARCA membership. So thanks y'all so much. Stay safe out there, be well, get those vaccines, and we'll hopefully see you this fall.